Hi, I went over your diagnosis sheets and graded them, and they're in your grade book. But I wanted to go over the sheets. I created one long document that is actually 73 pages long, where I took your sheets and kind of put them together. I didn't put everybody's in there because after I got to like the point of saturation, where I had multiple people doing the same disease, I quit adding them. So if yours isn't in there, that's the reason why it was one of the later ones I graded. And I just wanted to go over some highlights on this as I go through these 73 sheets. Anyways, the first one that we're looking at is Graves' disease. Signs and symptoms. Here he has a goiter, which you can get from this for sure. It's got approximately half the people with Graves' disease. Just remember, you can also get goiters from hypothyroidism as well. So some of the bigger symptoms we think about with hyperthyroidism, which is less common than hypothyroidism, is the weight loss, hypertension, really just being hot all the time, heat intolerance, tachycardia, insomnia, just kind of nervousness. That's why it's real important, especially for these psych folks, to remember this. You got somebody that's feeling kind of nervous. You need to check a TSH, right? So the thing you want to check is a TSH. That's just a good screening test. You don't need to do T4, free T4, all that stuff for screening. You just need to do a TH. So this is just a picture here of that and some of the myxedema that you can see. And then we have another one here. I'm just trying to think if there's anything special on some of these. So if you kind of read through this part 3, I think I maybe have 4 of these. You might pick up a little bit of different information on some of these than you did in others. And also you're reading different explanation as how they put it together, which I think is interesting, and some of these different charts in here are good. Okay, so you might find some of this more interesting. Just kind of read through it. It's not heavy reading. A lot of it's the same sort of stuff, and hopefully you looked at everybody's while they were in the discussion board. I liked this chart, so this is one I did put this one in, even though it was like number 5 or whatever, just because I really like this chart. Remember that hypothyroidism is much more dangerous than hypothyroidism too, so just be aware of that. Alright, next we get to hypothyroidism, which is much more common and not as many people did this one. There was a lot of Graves' disease, there was a lot on Cushing's disease, there was a lot on Addison's disease, which is rare. There was very little on hypothyroidism and type 2 diabetes, which you're going to see a lot more frequently. And from what I understand on boards is thyroid. But thyroid can cause so many things, tachycardia, hypertension, weight loss, decrease, irregular periods, mood changes, hair loss, thick skin, dry skin. So there's so many things, ADD kind of symptoms. So thyroid is real important endocrine system to be aware of for sure. Once again, the screening for this would be a THS. Here was a nice little feedback loop to have here. It's more common in women. Now, this is interesting because the normal TSH has actually dropped to 4.2. 10 years ago, you looked at this and it said 10, but we're finding so many subclinical people with hypothyroidism that they actually change the norms, which is good. And like I said, just think about this with a lot of diseases, especially like depression. It's always a good idea just to check a thyroid. And then this was a nice little chart here too, which I wanted to include so you guys to look over. I thought she made that chart and it was quite nice. And then this one here, just, just look at all the things it can do. Holy cats. It's amazing. So this is definitely something that you need to be well aware of. Hashimoto's disease is an autoimmune hypothyroidism and a major cause of it. And you can look in here, it's like 3.5 in every 1,000 women. And basically you get this and then you look for the antithyroid antibodies type thing. And if those are positive, then you know what you have, and then treatment is replacing the thyroid medication. Now, type 2 diabetes, the other big one that you'll see, and you really need to be aware of this one, is definitely going up in incidence. We are seeing a lot more of this, and this is basically insulin resistance. We're seeing a lot more of this even in the pediatric population just because we're getting fatter, right? And our diet's changing. There's actually a lot of evidence that shows that our low-fat diet, which is more high in more sugars and carbohydrates, is actually contributing to this. Okay, so diagnostic testing for type 2 diabetes. Was this type 2? I can't remember. Type 2 diabetes, yeah, this type 2 would be the A1Cs, and remember those measure like 3 months background of what your glucoses look like. Okay, and they have also over time raised the cutoff for glucose. It used to be anything above 110 was considered diabetic. Now it's 125. So that's why you need to really keep up with the literature, because these things change over time. That may have been the only type 2 diabetes we had. Only have one here. I think there was 2 for some reason. I think there was a type 1 somewhere too. Then growth hormone deficiency. This one you can see. And we see this a lot more in children, of course, that just aren't growing, that sort of thing. But this is not something that we are going to treat as family nurse practitioners, but you just want to be aware of the signs and symptoms. If you get a kid that's not growing, you need to check, guess what, TSH, to make sure that's not a problem, thyroid's not a problem. And you're also going to check bone age by doing an x-ray of the wrist, and they can actually tell you how far along the bones are growing. So for instance, if you get a 10-year-old who's really tiny and you do a bone age on him and his bones look like an 8-year-old, he's got 2 extra years of growing in there, so you don't get quite as worried about him as you would if you got a 10-year-old whose bone age is 10 and really tiny. Then you'd be more considering that they might need some extra growth hormone, and that's the kind of kid you would definitely want to refer to endocrine. Acromegaly. This one always kind of teases me because, I think it's funny because it's growth hormone, and there used to be, there's not so much anymore. There was ads on, your growth hormones, lowers as you age. Take this growth hormone and for beauty and that sort of thing. But as we know, and this is actually a nice little chart here too of the what you're going to see with folks. And as we know, let's see, I'm sure here she is. Most people would not consider this beautiful, and she's got too much growth hormone. But also pretty rare, although I'm wondering, just looking at these hands, I was just thinking about some people I know that have hands that are just big like that, and makes you wonder if maybe they have something like that going on. Diabetes insipidus. This I have mostly seen secondary to illness in a transient kind of way. Like they've gotten, well, this is in the NICU where they've been in shock, and then they'll go into renal failure, and then they'll get a secondary diabetes insipidus kind of situation for a little while till the kidneys heal. I do have one kid in the practice that has this. And it's something you definitely want to look at if somebody's kind of losing weight, and you check some lab work and you find out that their serum osmolarity is high, and I put the normal levels in here. But they're voiding a lot, and then their urine osmolarity is really low, because really, just think about this. If you need fluid, your kidneys should hold on to it. So if your serum osmolarity is high, it's telling you got too much solute in your blood, right? So you need more fluid, you need more free fluid going around there. So if that's the case, then your urine should be really concentrated too. It's in a case of like dehydration, or for whatever reason you're deprived of fluid. But when your urine looks like it's close to water, it's very the osmolarity of your urine is very little, then you've got diabetes insipidus here. And this is actually fairly easy to treat. Not super common, but anyhow. Some more information on that. Like I said, just read over it. This is kind of a complicated picture, but it's a good one. These people are going to be thirsty. Like I said, their sodium levels are going to be high, and for they're not going to grow. They're not going to do well. So they're not going to be in this state too terribly long before they get into trouble. So you're going to find this out pretty quickly. All right, and another diabetes insipidus. And like I said, I put one of these. One of these. This is actually 3 or 4. I kind of stuck them in between. I have one of these in my practice. I have probably a hypothyroidism in children. Young children is a big deal. Under a year of age, it can cause mental retardation, so you definitely don't want to miss it then. But in older kids, not so much as far as that goes. But I've probably got about a dozen kids with that, a whole bunch more with diabetes. And it was interesting to me how you guys picked out your diseases to write up on. Anyhow, let's kind of go back here. Just some causes of diabetes insipidus. And this is typically what I see is just like after infection. That's usually what I see. And okay, so a DDAVP is what you treat it with. And then the opposite of diabetes insipidus, which is your SAADH. And once again, typically for what I see, this is a transient type situation, and it's the opposite. Instead of having high sodiums, you have very low sodiums, and you have very, very concentrated urine, so you're holding on to urine. And both of these situations can get you into trouble with your electrolytes pretty quickly. So they're probably not going to go on very long, and hopefully, that's why if somebody gets sick, it's not a bad idea just to do a BMP. It tells you a whole bunch of stuff and rule out a whole bunch of stuff that you might need to know. And remember, BMP is your sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarb, creatinine, glucose. And then this picture, I'm assuming this guy here is just holding on to fluid. Just how much more puffy they can get. Fortunately. Then Addison's disease. I gotta tell you, this was the #1 most popular disease for you guys to pick to do. And let me come down here to epidemiology. 1 in 20,000. Not super common. I don't know anybody with this, but if I treated 20,000 adults, I'd have 1. So maybe some of you guys have seen this, but anyways, there's a lot here on this. Wouldn't be too terribly wonderful to have if you... Now, testing cortisol levels is always kind of interesting because your cortisol changes throughout the day. So I have found that a random cortisol level is not super helpful. Anyhow, at 1 in 20,000, I don't think you're going to have to read up on this before you ever had another patient with it, and maybe those of you that did it a lot. Let's see. Did I skip one here? Oh, I was thinking there's a picture of Cushing's. That's what was throwing me off. So Addison's disease and Cushing's, which are the exact opposite. Now Cushing's, I think you're going to see more often. especially amongst people that are on long-term steroid therapy for whatever reason, and which is one of the reasons we have to be careful of long-term steroid use. Remember, anybody that's on steroids for more than 7 days, you need to do a taper. Just don't stop them. You can get them into trouble with that. But you know, if you see kids or people that are on long-term steroids, they'll get that moon face and buffalo hump. And there are people walk around the community and you're like, I'm pretty sure you got Cushing's and I'd love to be able to test you, but it's not the kind of thing you want to just tell people. The striation there on the abdomen. And then there's also some good, I liked this picture here. I thought that was pretty good too. So when you're looking at these, just remember how important the hypothalamus and your pituitary gland. All right, so just kind of read over these. Like I said, a lot of this information repeats. It looks like a lot, but I've already gone through all the pages here, I think, just about. Got a little bit more. On some of the symptoms, you also see how some of the symptoms kind of cross up. Rare. Although I swear, I think you see people around and you wonder what their levels look like. You wonder if there's like different levels of this, you might have like subclinical kind of disease going on. But that's just my thoughts. Anyhow, read over these. They are helpful. Pay particular attention. I thought there was a type 1 diabetes, but I didn't see it in there. Maybe I didn't put it in. But type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, hypothyroidism being the biggest ones you're going to see. You might see, depending on where you work, you might see SAIDH or a diabetes insipidus, especially if the Cushing's you're probably going to see is more related to use of steroid therapy for people with some chronic illnesses. But you do need to be aware of these. The biggest thing you need to know is just need to know about them, so you're looking for them. For you psych people, you need to really think about the thyroid as far as affecting your mental health.